Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us on our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. We are a horror podcast, so we'll be talking about horror things and horror culture, which could involve such sensitive subjects such as like child abuse, rape, F-bombs.
Bad stuff.
But with that out of the way, Steve, what do we have coming up on the schedule?
Well, we've still got about 10 people on deck. We're adding them as we go, so still not going to go through the whole list because there's too many to name. But as far as other announcements, we are doing listen parties on Discord every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to join us as we go through the episodes and chat about them, please feel free to join us. There's a invite link on our website, horrormakesushappy.com. And then after that, often Chris does a drawing party at 9 p.m. for his webcomic that he does, which is piecesofflesh.com.
Yep.
And also we've got a coupon code for my book on smashwords.com. The book is a guide to the recovery toolbox. It's about 80 of the tools of recovery that I learned in my journey. Not meant to be like a real self-help book in the normal sense, but it's more like a field guide, sort of an introduction to the tools, and then you can get up to speed with them faster and then maybe use them in your recovery or talking to people that you know in recovery and things like that. But today we have Ms. Clare Castleberry. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. So the things you're already known for, we've got Azalea House, Second Skin, and Five Little Deaths. Do you want to let us know what you're currently working on?
Sure. Right now I'm putting together a short story collection. It kind of centers around female vengeance. And then I'm also working on kind of a sort of, it's almost like a memoir-y, kind of almost like The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis thing about my time going to college in Baton Rouge when there were actually a few active serial killers in the area.
Okay.
That
sounds interesting.
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying. So I'm also doing the whole book signing tour circuit reading thing for Forbidden Gardens, which will be out November 7th.
Cool.
Nice.
Is that the anthology one? Or that's the memoir one?
Forbidden Gardens is kind of like a follow-up to Azalea House. As far as like the memoir-y type thing, this is just kind of like a separate thing that I'm working on. I don't even know what it is yet. It's very drafty.
Yeah, memoirs are supposed to be like that. They're organic.
Yeah.
I was typing when you were talking there, so I apologize, but did you say geographically where you went to college and the thing about the serial killers?
I was at Louisiana State University, and so this was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So in the mid to late 90s, there was a serial killer in the area named Derek Todd Lee. And then later on, there was another serial killer, Sean Vincent Gillis. And then I think there was another one operating out of the New Orleans area. I can't recall what his name. It's terrifying. I mean, it's
that's
almost
like Son of Sam times 3. You got so many to choose from that you can be worried about every day. Right?
Oh my gosh, I know. I mean, it was just that it was a time of high anxiety plus college on top of everything else. You know.
College isn't stressful.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right. Well, I was going to ask whether or not any of these had been caught. So the fact that you have names for 2 or 3 of them, that's a good thing.
Yes.
I guess we will get to that further on in the call because college would have come later. But I don't know how much we've talked about this offline or if you've gotten a chance to listen to any of our calls. But basically what we do is we break this into 4 sections. We talk about childhood, teenage years, and adulthood. And then the wrap up at the end, we talk about any common themes that have come up during the previous sections of the call. So starting with childhood, and by the way, this is not meant to be a therapy session, so if there's any questions you don't want to answer, just say pass and we'll move on. But starting with childhood, what are your earliest memories of some scary things?
I had, I guess it's not typically, it's not uncommon, but I had something traumatic happen as a child, and it kind of shaped the way that I interact with people. And I've gotten a lot better. Therapy helped, but I think it heightened my intuition about people in general. So I do see a silver lining to that particular event, but I've always kind of been terrified of everything. people in general. And then I almost drowned, and then it shows up time and time again in my writing. And I always notice the same themes. It's intimacy and fear interwoven, mixed in with the fear of drowning, and then usually with a strong sense of place, since everything in Louisiana is pretty much haunted. So a few things kind of shaped the rest of my life.
Reading between the lines here, and again, don't know what you're comfortable sharing, but intimacy and fear and intuition about people, kind of highlights what some of that trauma might have been related to. That is a terrible thing to deal with in childhood. Did you have any help with that? I mean, or was it something that didn't get discovered until much later?
It's really funny, and I think that this is pretty common with people who have suffered trauma in childhood, is that I knew that there was something underlying and I would remember flashes of it, but it didn't really come up until later, after I got a divorce in my 30s. And it's really funny because I went to like a group therapy kind of thing, and a lot of people said the same thing. It kind of takes something stressful again to bring up what exactly happened. It's interesting. It
sounds like it would be something that like you don't really bring up unless you have to, and situations like that bring stuff like that to the forefront because it's one of the choice now.
Right, exactly.
My personal experience, at least, has been that it's excuse me, sometimes just luck of the draw of having certain other things happening in my adult life that triggers things, and then maybe weeks or months later, my mind will still be kind of rolling over these things, and then it's just a chance occurrence of whether or not two thoughts come back to back, and then the light bulb comes on, and I realize, there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Like I can remember 2 different times where years later, I was standing in the shower. It's funny that both times I was in the shower, but just, randomly thinking about different things as I'm, going about my business cleaning. And the pieces fell into place. And I'm like, holy shit. I didn't even, I wish those pieces had fallen into place years ago, but just sometimes that's how it is.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how the mind works like that.
It is. All right, so I guess general answer then that it didn't get addressed in childhood. Let's ask some of the other childhood questions. In terms of like the horror genre, was there any media that stood out to you, or did you not become a fan of that until later?
Oh, I was a fan very early on. I read a lot, and then when I ran out of books, I would go down the driveway. My mother owned a neighborhood bar, and I used to go down there and spy on her customers through the bullet holes in the side of the building.
How iconic. That is just awesome.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So, I mean, it was great. It was so much drama and these like epic knife fights with bikers. And it was just, oh my goodness, it was just so thrilling. And then I got caught. And that was right around the time that a little video store opened up down the road. So aside from reading, my mother would go and get me these horror VHS tapes to keep me away from the bar because she was a huge fan of horror too. So
honey, please stay away from the knife fights. Watch Hellraiser instead.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of worked, when I was reading too. So I guess she thought, this is fine. She'll turn out fine.
No, that's a better alternative if you ask me.
I turned out fine.
Yeah. We all pretty much did. But I used to crouch behind my dad's chair while they watched movies, and they rented and brought home Halloween 2. And I kind of, showed myself when I screamed when Michael Myers stabbed the nurse in that epic scene. So I was already hooked. And then she would rent things like Night of the Living Dead, which was one of her favorites. Alien was another one of her favorites. Mm-hmm.
Classics.
And so we used to, she would have me on her lap while she read these John D. MacDonald pulp novels. And that's kind of how I learned to read. And we would watch horror together too. So after this traumatic event that I mentioned in childhood, I developed something called selective mutism, where you just kind of stop talking or you only speak to certain people. So this was kind of like her method to get me to talk about things. She would say, well, what would you do if, zombies invaded the house, and, where would you go? Watch how these people deal with this situation. So it kind of presented a lot of interesting what ifs for me. And she would quiz me on what I would do. And, I hope I never have to rely on that if we ever have a zombie apocalypse. But it sure did come in handy when, I decided to write later on down the line.
Yep.
But I was pretty good about sneaking around and being unseen. Something that I took like a great thrill in. I loved to just, go around being unnoticed.
Hide and seek was your favorite game?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Oh yes. I got in trouble so many times at department stores for hiding out in the little clothing racks.
Dude, it is so easy to hide in those things. It's just like a little house made of clothes.
Yep.
Exactly.
And no one expects you to be in there.
I know, right? Well, now it's kind of like a thing you see all over social media. People are around our age are like, hey, do you remember hiding
they
in
don't
these
even have
clothing
malls
racks?
anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Right. But there was another incident where, I had watched all of these kind of classic horror movies, but the thing that just this was like a car accident. I couldn't look away. I got so good at sneaking around that at the babysitter's house, I was able to hide behind another chair and watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was about 7 or so. It was just like a train wreck, and I couldn't look away, but I just developed like a fascination with horror books and movies at an early age, and it never waned.
Some of our guests have reported that there was a dividing line where before this dividing line, they were afraid of certain things, horror related. And then after the dividing line, they saw it as enjoyment. Was there that kind of dividing line for you, or was it always pleasure?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre scared the crap out of me. I don't think that anyone under 10 really, it's probably not a good idea to watch it when you're that young. But to me, at that point, that was really a pivotal moment in my life, because I watched it, I got through it, it was scary, but at the end of the movie, I was okay. So
because, Sally gets away, so it's a happy ending. And, there's just one thing I just thought of. I don't know if Texas Chainsaw has come up in the childhood stage very often, but it does kind of lure you in if you're a young child, because the goofiness with Franklin in the beginning, where he's all and razzing everyone, like that seems fun and innocent, and then the screaming and the extreme close-ups on eyeballs.
Yeah.
It's a bait and switch.
Oh yeah, it totally is. And it's still, I think one of my favorite movies. Because the ending is so satisfying. But I came away from that thinking, okay, things happen, but I don't have to be a victim. I can deal with the fear and kind of press through it. So to me, in that sense, horror's always been the best kind of therapy.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Did you participate in Halloween as a kid?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this is really funny. You'll love this, but I grew up kind of out in the country. So my mom would take me to Baton Rouge for trick-or-treating. This neighborhood was popping, man. Everybody got into it. The streets were filled with kids. It was just a blast. But so we lived out in the country, and we had one trick-or-treater come by our house, and it was when my dad was home. And, someone knocked on the door, and he thought, oh my God, who is this? And he opened the door, and it was a trick-or-treater. And he was like, man, I don't have anything to give you. I've got some spaghetti. Here you go. This is like so my dad too. So he gave he gave this poor child spaghetti. After that, we never got any trick-or-treaters ever again.
Was it like Charlie Kelly from Always Sunny style too? Like no bowl or anything, just like, here's some spaghetti, I'll put it in your hands.
I think it was at least in a Tupperware.
Okay. Or just dump it in the bag with the candy. Here you go, kid. It's fresh.
I doubt the kid had any other candy.
Yeah, true.
It was so funny. So yeah, that's kind of like a classic family story.
When you went to Baton Rouge, did you have a favorite costume?
I dressed up as a black cat every year without fail. I chose like a ghost costume one year and totally regretted it. But I think the black cat resonated with me because black cats like to kind of sneak around in the shadows. And I just really love the idea of being a background character and observing. I still do. So Halloween was really magical for me as a child. I loved it.
I bet, especially in Baton Rouge. I mean, that's like, just, the whole theme of costuming is just kind of built into that area by default.
Oh my gosh, so true. Yeah, they really, really got into it.
I think you and I would get along in person because I'm also that type of sit back and people watch kind of thing. Yeah. Sometimes I question, why I decided to become an author with this kind of like. Side. Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do all these readings and signings and stuff. This is not really what I signed up for. It's the other half of it because you're doing the people watching while you're doing the writing. But then
exactly. Yeah.
Just split yourself into two personalities or more, and one of them can people watch and one of them can interact.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what happens.
Did you have any scary dreams when you were a kid, or reoccurring dreams?
I did later on have dreams that I was being buried alive, and I'm not sure if that was just from growing up around Louisiana folklore with so many, it's like pirate stories, buried treasures, swamps, kind of grew up with those kinds of things, or if that came from some movie. But they lasted for a couple of years and kind of came back in stressful times when I was an adult, but really don't have too many nightmares anymore. I do have lucid dreams that are very strange.
Well, at least they're lucid, so you're in control.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the times they're kind of boring. Like I'll go see what the cat is up to or something like that.
Well, that makes sense because, like, if you're in a lucid dream and you realize you're dreaming, the first thing you would do would be like, I wonder what this thing that's normally this in real life is like in dream.
Was there ever a time in your real life when you were terrified of something as a child?
You mentioned it drowning or near drowning.
Yeah. So I had this incident. I was at a babysitter's house and I fell into their little fish pond. And the weirdest thing was that there was this sense of time loss. So I think that's what was so terrifying, is that there was this time period where I guess I was out of it. And it was just like this sense of total loss of control. And it freaked me out, and I wouldn't go near water, but my mom made me take swimming lessons. And I love to swim. When I was living in California, I loved to surf, but I still occasionally get this sense of doom when I'm in the water. I mean, especially in the Pacific Ocean, you don't really, all you can think about is Jaws, sharks. Something weird, sea creatures,
I will not go in the ocean if I can't feel the bottom.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, it is worth it if you can kind of push past the fear and catch a wave or something like that. But I still have like some moments where I'm like, oh no, to hell with this. I'm just going to go sit on the beach and watch the waves.
Yeah. Well, your mom making you take swimming lessons was probably a good thing, considering, what happened. That's at least make sure that kind of thing can't happen again.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt completely calm or safe or bliss?
Yeah. So I was reading fairly early, and I also enjoyed writing. So I would retreat to my bedroom and do some writing and just kind of hang out, listen to music. I grew up in the 80s, so there's tons of great stuff on the radio. But I also found a lot of peace in the woods around my house as well. So that kind of became an escape for me when things would kind of get too loud. I would just go out there and enjoy the quiet.
Which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Being that you already were identifying as a fan of the genre in some respect, did you stick with that in teenage years, or did you veer away from it and come back to it in adult years?
Oh, yeah, I stuck with it. We got cable, and that was just like the most incredible thing ever because Tales from the Crypt would come on HBO. And they also had these like 80s, 90s erotic thrillers on late night television. You know, the ones with like the jazz music playing in the background.
Oh, yeah. With like USA Up All Night or something?
Yes, loved those. There was always some kind of like minor tension, like who will die? And then in between, there were these ads for phone sex. And so that was great. So, you know, in my college years, that really influenced me because I would just write these for fun stories, and I would read like personal ads and kind of weave them in with like phone sex operator backstories. You know, they placed the ad, met this person, fell in love, had sex. But since I was also into horror, like the people in the personal ads had horrible fates, like they died or a werewolf came in through the window and ate them while they were naked, that sort of thing. So, because that always happens, like once you take your clothes off, that's doom, right?
Yes, yeah, of course.
Sealed your fate.
Yeah, it sure did.
Any other specific media jump onto you from your teenage years?
I really loved Candyman as a teen, and that was also kind of there were some great, horror things that came out in the 90s. Candyman was definitely a favorite, and I would revisit a lot of things that I would watch in my childhood years. Like I was obsessed with the Howling series, all of them. And
some were good.
Yeah. I mean, in kind of like a questionable way. Like it's kind of like more of a fun movie. So the things that I would watch in the 80s, I would love to rewatch and revisit again as a teenager. Like The Thing, American Werewolf in London, Child's Play, Cat's Eye was another favorite of mine. Serpent and the Rainbow, that was another one that my mom loved quite a bit.
Is Cat's Eye the Stephen King one with the electric floor?
Yes. Oh, yeah, it was. And so that one was really entertaining for me because I would put it on, and my little brother was terrified of that movie. Do you remember the little story with like the creature that comes out of the wall with like the jester hat?
I think so.
He hated that thing. Yeah, it's worth a rewatch. It's pretty humorous if you watch it now. It's still, the story still holds up though.
What did you like about Candyman?
Oh gosh, it was just the story was so good. And I think part of the reason I love horror is just the atmosphere. Like they're going into, a certain part of the city that's different from where they come from, and there's like a whole horror behind repressed areas as well that are just kind of forgotten. And I think that movie does such a good job of highlighting that. And that kind of goes back to the serial killer cases that I was talking about when we first started talking. That one serial killer, Sean Vincent Gillis, he focused on sex workers. So I think he killed like 8 people, and you didn't really hear about it until he was caught. And it's like, oh, this is the guy who has been terrorizing these poor people. And the news they just completely ignored it because of these people's backgrounds. So I think that's what I like about Candyman is that it kind of, the story revolves around that kind of narrative. And I think it's important. There's still just not enough focus on crimes in places like that. So that to me is important.
When you said it was a good story, the things that you just mentioned about, relating to the people and the trials and tribulations, is that what you were referring to, or was there something else in addition to that?
No, I think it's not so much. Maybe it is a little bit of relating to these people and feeling invisible and knowing that they were kind of invisible in the public eye. I think that that's something that I've always related to, and that's probably why I like to rewatch it. But I think there's also kind of like the forbidden love story behind it between Candyman and the main character who's researching his backstory. Forbidden Love, and I think like love and kind of all different avenues and angles, it does kind of show up again and again in my story. So I think that's part of the appeal too.
It's been a long time since I watched that movie, and I don't remember a forbidden love aspect to it. What am I forgetting?
It was implied between Candyman and the woman. Like there was definitely some tension between them.
Yeah. And at the end, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. Like, but who hasn't seen it? But there's this just kind of like romantic embrace, and he says, I can't remember what the line is, but he's like, I've been waiting lifetimes for you, or something like that. And there's this artistic depiction of the two of them, the likeness of their characters that goes back to the Civil War era.
Had a real Bram Stoker's Dracula with vibe
absolutely
to it,
yeah.
It's interesting that there's also a double entendre there, because I don't remember that scene or the thing about going back to the 1800s, but also, I mean, waiting multiple lifetimes, it could be referring to the ones that he's killed. I mean,
that's true. Yeah. That is so true. Ooh, creepy.
Those were short lifetimes.
Yes.
Shortened by him.
What about Tales from the Crypt? Was there a particular episode or scene that you remember for that?
All of them freaked me out, but there was this one in particular. It was about this creepy convict dressed as Santa Claus, and he came into the house via an open window and terrorized this family. And that was the one that I think freaked me out the most. That still stands out in my mind, I think, because it's a home invasion thing. And man, every time I see that in a movie or read about it, I'm just like, that's just like terrifying. But all of them were so good. It's really hard to pick out a favorite. There was another one about an artist that was directed by John Harrison. And I actually got to meet him at StokerCon and tell him how much I loved that episode. It was so epic. Loved it. Yeah. But I don't think I ever missed an episode. I was so addicted to Tales from the Crypt.
What was the episode about the artist about?
I don't remember. I'm kind of blanking on specifics right now, but he would depict these murders, and then, it kind of has like the diabolical twist in the middle of it where he's coercing things. So it was a good one. They were all kind of deep, they all had this kind of message if you kind of look at them and rewatch them, which I loved.
Yeah, they all had kind of there was always a monkey's paw vibe to it, Yeah, you can have this, but...
Did you participate in Halloween as a teen?
I did a little bit. Growing up in Louisiana, again, like everybody was into it. So as I got a little bit older, here we go back to the observing thing again. I used to love to go to the French Quarter and just sit on a bench and watch people dressed up walking around. That was, it sounds so simple, but I just loved it.
No, people watching is the best. We have something here in Florida that's like a little mini Bourbon Street in a way. It's Ybor City, and in my late teens to like 18 to 20s, we would just go to Ybor and sometimes sit and people watch for hours.
Yeah,
there are definitely some characters out there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Especially in the French Quarter, you can get your fill of people in about an hour.
I bet.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a favorite costume on yourself since you weren't dressing up, but I guess did you have a favorite costume that you saw someone else wearing in your teenage years?
Oh, there's a whole vampire culture in New Orleans, so it was absolutely fascinating to see people's takes on that. You would have like Lost Boys type vampires, Dracula type vampires, sexy vampires, business vampires. It was so amazing. So that was really my favorite, because I think the vampire is just one of those classic things that you could do so many takes on, and it never got old for me.
Any scary dreams as a teen?
Not really. I did that dream that I was talking about of being buried alive. That did kind of come up a few times in my teen years. So I'm still not really sure what that was all about. Like I said, I'm not really sure if I picked that up from media or, hey, it might have been, feeling the effects of social suffocation from putting myself out there too much. Who knows? I had kind of like a big friend group, and I think it was like just too much for me. And I think really I'm an introvert. And when I was in my teen years, I didn't know that. And I was just trying to, do what my friends were doing. When you're a teenager, you're stupid like that, right? You don't know yourself. So that may very well be where those dreams came from.
Possible. I also may have been related to your traumatic experience too. I mean, since you said that didn't even come to mind until your 30s, there might be some relation to this too.
It's possible. Side tangent on being buried alive. I saw a thing the other day. I think it was actually a meme, but it was a very informative meme. And it was all about what to do if you're buried alive, multiple steps, like a diagram, like on an airplane. And the one that stuck out the most was take your shirt, put it over your head so you have an air pocket, and then break the top and let the dirt fall in on you. And then I think it was like, try to sit up, because then you'll shift the dirt to your waist. You are welcome, listeners. This is how you get out of buried alive. I just cured so many phobias. Put your shirt over your head, you have a pocket of air.
That's genius.
The other thing that I've read about that too is that if the sitting up part doesn't work, to
wiggle.
Kind of. It's instead of trying to go straight up, it's basically kind of go side to side, because if there's so much weight, if you're buried deeply, then it's too much weight above you. But if you kind of go side to side, then a little bit of the dirt will drop below you, and then you kind of sit on top of that, and then you wiggle the other way, and some more drops on the other side. If you can go back and forth, then you can. Anyway,
good to know.
Anything in real life actually terrify you as a teen?
Oh yeah, I mean, people, intimacy, everything really. Going out, leaving my house. I don't know. I think I was just kind of like a paranoid person growing up. Now, of course, I kind of know where that comes from, and I'm better able to deal with it. But I dressed up as a goth and kind of kept quiet, and that just so happened to scare the crap out of people. So I thought,
it works, right?
I thought this is great. Just scare away the ones who you don't want to be around or who don't want to understand you, and keep around the ones who do want to understand you. So
and if anybody fucks with you, just hiss at them or say you put a curse on them or something, and
exactly.
they actually believe it.
Exactly. So that worked very well for me in my teen years. So did reading things like Poppy Z. Bride or Anne Rice, and out on the lawn during my lunch breaks. It attracted good people who were reading the same things, but it also kind of repelled people who just didn't get it.
I was wondering if Poppy was going to come up.
Oh, of course.
Horror, vampires.
Yeah, he's a fantastic writer. Even his stuff about the cooking culture in New Orleans, I've read those too, and they're fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time in your teens when you felt completely calm or safe at this?
Yeah, in my teens, we found this coffee shop in Baton Rouge that was kind of like, it had a bohemian vibe. People would go there and play acoustic guitar. And of course, there was coffee. That's where my coffee addiction started.
Coffee is life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And they just kind of welcomed creative people in that space. You could go in and buy a cup of coffee for $1 and sit there all afternoon and all night. And it was just like a calm place to go with my calm friends who are also into kind of like writing and drawing and hanging out and playing chess and things like that. So,
dude, like totally can relate. God, I miss those nights.
I know. Coffee shop culture back in the day was just, it's so epic.
We would do exactly that at a local coffee shop here with my friend who's no longer here. He moved abroad. But exactly that. Coffee, chess, and I would work on my comic. Yeah. Good times.
Did you, at this point, have other friends who were into horror, or is it still just your mom mainly?
I had some friends who were kind of forced into the situation.
By you?
Yeah. So
You're educating them.
Yeah, that's how I liked to look at it. So I have a childhood friend who, she's completely opposite, blonde, very like preppy, outgoing, kind of like very positive, upbeat. And, it was just kind of like a given. Anytime she would come to my house, we were going to watch a horror movie. And she would just like cling to me. I think I still have scars from her fingernails on my arm. And she would force me to go to the bathroom with her every time she needed to pee. And she's going to kill me when she listens to it was a good relationship. When I would go to her house, we would watch things like The Princess Bride or what have you. So I was well-rounded, I'd like to think. But yeah.
I'm sure you've seen the meme of the two sisters.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, that was exactly how it was. Yes.
Moving into adult years, what were some of your favorite media, or have been your favorite media in your adult years?
This is going to be a little bit strange, but there's this book called The Gift of Fear. I think the author is Gavin DeBrocker. Everyone should read that because it really just kind of centers around intuition and how it can save you. And there are a lot of nonfiction anecdotes in there about people who had escaped really dangerous potential situations by listening to their fear and getting out of sticky situations. That really, it scared the crap out of me, but it was useful. And it kind of reinforced this idea that I had that intuition was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
So it really had a profound effect on me. And as an adult, as I moved into adulthood and started going to college, that is when all of the serial killer activity started up. And it was really terrifying. And I thought for a while that I wanted to go into forensic psychology, but it was just too much for me. I think that by that time, I wanted to have a more removed role and just kind of fictionalize things and write about them from a place that was a little bit more removed. So that's really when I think I did pull away from horror a little bit in my college years because especially anything having to do with like slashers or serial killers, because it was just too close to home, I think. Yeah. And then after reading The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBrocker, I decided to kind of take a more academic stance on it and remove myself a little bit more, which helped.
You're not the first person to talk about things like slashers and real life being too close to home. And I have also heard about The Gift of Fear before, although I think you might be the first guest that's brought it up, but I've heard of it outside of that.
Highly recommend it.
Any other media jumped out to you?
Let's see. I was pretty busy with college then. I was extremely blessed, though. I had this class, and the name of it was like Gender and Horror. Oh my gosh, this class was just like absolutely amazing. That was actually the class that got me more into Poppy Z. Bright. We read Exquisite Corpse in that class. This is how awesome that professor was.
Nice.
Yeah, we read all kinds of things. I was mostly reading a lot of books. Let's see, what else do I have up here on my shelf that was from her? Robert Bloch's Psychos, a little bit of Clive Barker. I mean, all kinds of things. Anytime that I had free time to read, I was reading horror. I've got all these like 90s novels up here that I'm taking a peek at that are behind me. A lot of things that came out by Stephen King. I loved to revisit those. Things like Cujo that I read when I was a kid. I'd love to pick them up again and see how it applied to gender.
Was there a scene in Exquisite Corpse that stands out to you?
I think all of it. It's really, it's just like a wonderful educated take on serial killers, I think. And the fact that it's told in first person, most of the book is told in first person, that just really, I mean, I kind of felt like we were getting good insight into how people think. It was just fascinating.
What about Psychos?
Oh, Psychos. Oh my goodness. So this one, I'll have to take a look at it again. So this is Robert Bloch's Psychos, Tales of Madness and Murder. I think there's one in here by Richard Christian Matheson that I remember very, very well. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. Grandpa's Head by Lawrence Watt Evans. That was one that really, really stood out to me. This was a great read. There's a lot of great names in here. Stephen King is of course in here. Yvonne Narrow. Let's see, who else? Billy Sue Mosiman, Interview with a Psycho. That was one of my favorite ones because it takes place between two people and it's an interview. Anything that kind of gave me insight into the reality that was Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge during the time that I was there, it felt like it was helping me get closer to the psychology and in some way protecting me. Yeah, I think there was a lot of appeal in that for me.
I can see how. So what I'm thinking of is, the being invisible part of people watching. What I'm thinking is it doesn't have to mean that you're hiding, although that obviously helps too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering how much of it is the reaction maybe to the trauma, or maybe if the desire to be that introvert even preceded the trauma, and then maybe that was just why you were targeted. Like there's multiple different ways that could have played out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've thought about this a lot. And I think by the time I was a young adult, I just did not want to be a victim. And I think that I was just looking for ways in any way that I could to protect myself.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then, like you say, digging into the psychology of it and trying to understand those thoughts, that is an avenue for control, because if I can understand the way those people think, then maybe I can avoid the danger.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, and he's talked a lot about the shadow self. Everyone carries the shadow and the less embodied and the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. So people like that scare me. People who haven't really come to terms with their shadow side freak me out a little bit. And that's what I love about horror, people, because we're all about that, man. We're ready to get in there and, make friends with that shadow side, the other. And
not acknowledging your shadow side is like bottling up, stress or rage or feelings like that. You can't just ignore it your whole life, because then that's how you get serial killers.
Exactly.
Or heart attacks, one of the two, or aneurysms.
Or those two.
Exactly.
Won't be the first time I've brought this up on a call before, but are you familiar with the Tool song 46 and 2?
Yes.
My favorite song of theirs.
Yeah.
Halloween as an adult.
I still love to observe. I'm up in New Hampshire actually right now, but we do try to. I'm kind of like part-time down in New Orleans because I have so much family in that area, but we do try to make it a point to go there as often as we can. Still, my favorite activity is to go down to the French Quarter and people watch. It kind of seems like when I try to dress up as an adult, it just ends up wonky or something. The last time I tried to do it, I did like vampire teeth and they fell out by the end of the night. So I was just kind of like a biker chick or something, which is fine, But yeah, I really do like to see what kind of creative things people come up with. It's such a joy.
Any scary dreams as an adult?
Not really. Mostly I just have trouble with insomnia lately. But when I do dream, it seems to just kind of be weird lucid dream type stuff. Like, I'll go check on people or see what kind of famous people I can meet, or try to do something I can't do in real life, like play guitar or sing or something like that.
Well, that's pretty fucking cool. You're making use of your lucid dreaming.
Yeah,
I can do anything here. So I wonder, could someone learn an instrument if they just practiced in lucid dreaming?
Hey, there's a theory out there that says that it does help with things like that. I'm never going to be like singing in front of people or anything. If you want a room cleared or something like that, I can sing or, try to play some. I think really my thing is like writing, and I'll kind of like stick to that. But to have a little bit of fun or something like that, I'll try it out in a dream.
It's funny is until you got into the thing about like learning how to play an instrument, it occurred to me that you're basically people watching in your lucid dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my favorite activity is to be creepy and just spy on people.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. And anything in real life terrify you as an adult?
Still everything. I try to reflect on some of the horror-y experiences that I had through media to get through things. There's a movie, I think it's called Attack of the Killer Bees or something like that. It was released in the 70s. So I was terrified of bees for the longest time, and now I tried to overcome that fear, and now I kind of keep and manage bees on my property.
Oh, nice.
That
is one way of confronting that fear, yeah.
Right. I still get freaked out sometimes. Like, this is the time of year where they're very protective of their honey stores. So anytime you go to check on them, they're like, hey, screw you. I'm going to sting you. So, it's still pretty scary. But, things still freak me out. I still have anxiety. I've just kind of learned how to manage it a little bit better through meditation and writing more horror and reading and watching more horror. It's the greatest kind of therapy.
It can be, definitely. I'm interested in the being afraid of bees as a kid, although I can also understand that how can I say this? What's the word I'm looking for? Like a primal sense? Like it's like there doesn't even necessarily have to be a reason for it. Although in my case there was. I got stung as a kid, and in a really bad place. It hurt like hell for days. They got me on the top of my lip.
Oh, geez. Yeah. That's the worst.
Yeah. I got it on my bottom lip.
Did you really?
Yep. And I have
that's crazy.
Kind of full lips already. So yeah, I was like, oh God, what is that cartoon where the guy has the giant bottom lip? Yeah, it was comical.
I was in a swimming pool at my aunt and uncle's house playing with my cousin. We were throwing a football back and forth, and he threw it over my head, so I had to turn around to go get it. Well, I dunked under the water to swim underwater because it was easier for me at that moment, and popped up where the football was, but there was a bee or a wasp there that I must have scared.
On the surface, you just breach, and it's like, I'm on your lip now. Yep. I'm going to sting you.
And it just felt like somebody smashed me in the top of my mouth with a sledgehammer.
Yep.
And we have pictures of it. Actually, my lip is blown up to like 3 times the size of a normal lip.
Oh my gosh.
It was like that for 2 or 3 days.
Kung Fu Hustle. That was it. That was the thing I was trying to think of. It was the scene when the guy got bit by the snakes on his lips, and it was like that.
That is not what I was thinking of, but okay. So yeah, I could definitely understand that being and even without having an experience like that, to me that is like a fear of snakes or spiders. That's
yeah, it's natural. Yeah, I think, like you said, bees are kind of a primal fear because you're taught it at a young age. Like, these things are bad; they will sting you.
Yeah. I think that's totally normal. But it's interesting though. I mean, I went from, bees to people to just like all kinds of things, worrying about things.
People can sting you too.
They certainly can.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. But
and it hurts for a lot longer.
Oh, it sure does. Absolutely. It's interesting though that these things, eroticism too, it starts out as this very primal biological base, and not just us, other animals too, it becomes very nuanced and complex.
Mhm.
So it's kind of an interesting thing with humans. We have this very unique cognitive competence to transform basic primal biological things into something more. And that's always been really fascinating to me.
That was an unexpected segue. I was going to make the joke about another kind of sting, but there was the first thing that I thought, well, is that where the connection was? Because I didn't see that coming.
No, I agree. That's a good comparison. It's like animals and organisms on this planet in general have like a built-in response to trauma and things like that, and it's just fight or flight, and just certain things that are generationally learned that are bad, like your defense against things like bees. But humans, unlike everything else, have a little bit more sentience, so we put a layer of what does this mean on top of it.
Yeah, as you were talking about it, what I was thinking about is often, at least in my experience with the counseling and 12-step stuff and experience that I've had, for me, fears and desires, the best analogy I can give is if you imagine standing on the corner of a street that's got a street sign that points the four directions, north, south, east, west. It's kind of like being at that intersection, and fear is pointing one way down the street, and desire is pointing the other way up the same street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like what we fear losing what we desire, and if we know what we fear, then by figuring it out, analyzing it, we might also understand something about what we desire too. So, but as you say, that's both of those things can be at a very primal level, because there are certain things that we both fear and desire at a primal level. And then there are other things that we fear or desire, maybe not at a primal level, but for other reasons.
Yeah.
Anywho.
I both fear and desire bacon because I love it, but it splashes and burns me.
That's a great example.
Going back to our interview with Simon Bamford, just don't cook it naked.
Never cook bacon naked.
Was there ever a time in your adult life when you feel completely calm or safe or bliss?
Yeah, again, coffee shops, I think, and my own home with my cats is very, very peaceful. And, we live out here in the middle of nowhere in the woods. So hiking is always a great source of pleasure and relaxation for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I take a lot of pleasure in just writing and getting into that flow state, like I always have. It's kind of become an old friend.
Mm. Do you remember the last person you hurt?
Let's see. It was a family member, and it was an argument about something totally ridiculous. And we've both been kind of dwelling over it for the past few months, but things are starting to get a little bit better. But it was kind of a mutual wound. Mm-hmm. So those are always so delightful. We as humans just love to overcomplicate little simple things. This is where we get into trouble,
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last person you helped?
Oh, let's see. Probably my husband. And again, today we're about to go check on the bees, and I'm very grateful to have his assistance. And I think he feels the same way, because it's very terrifying to go out there by yourself and manage these creatures, You have to have a lot of respect for him, and he's very calm, and he also kind of keeps me calm, and he says the same thing about me. So we help each other in that way. It's a good balance.
So the next two questions I'm going to ask, these are going to cover your entire life, and it might not just be about horror. So
okay.
Any genre, but I'm going to give you the next two questions at the same time, because it could be the same answer for both or different answers. What movie have you watched more times than any other? And what movie is your favorite movie?
Let's see. I have watched The Neverending Story more times than I would like to admit. My mother took me to go see that film in the theater, and I guess, 84 when it first came out. And then she took me to see it about 4 or 5 more times because I wouldn't shut up about it. And it's still become a comfort movie. And I think it's because of the escapism that appeals to me so much. There's another film, Possession, that's come out on Shudder. And I saw it a long time ago. It was released in 1981.
As the one with Sam Neill.
Yes.
So
oh my God. I never get tired of that film. I love the dichotomy between, love and hate and, her normal self versus her possessed self, and the whole thing going on with Berlin. And it's just so artfully and brilliantly done. Oh my gosh, love that movie.
Okay. Favorite movie?
That's a tricky one. It does kind of change. Right now, I think it's still Possession.
Okay. Is it something about the dichotomy that makes it your favorite or something else?
I think so, because I saw a lot of parallels between that and New Orleans. In New Orleans, you can be on St. Charles Avenue, and there are just like these opulent mansions, and then you can go back a couple of blocks, and then it's a completely different neighborhood. And I saw a lot of parallels between the atmosphere in that movie and my hometown. You have like this gothic quality to the South as well, where there's a lot of decaying buildings and things like that. But then you also have ultra rich people showing off their houses and their Jaguars. So
there's a lot of that in the Tampa area too, especially with Ybor and Bayshore. And I wonder, is it the fact that swampy areas are just in a natural, constant state of decay that offers them so much to that Gothic theme?
Oh, I think so. I mean, here we go back to water again and swamps. Lots of bad things happen out there. I mean, alligators. Whoo!
They will eat you.
Yeah. They're nothing to play around with.
No. Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
I really like occult and metaphysical elements in horror because to me it's kind of like an escape. I like to get lost inside that world that seems very mysterious and removed.
Yeah. Like if it has its own built-in lore that just has these ancient rules.
Absolutely. Yeah, that kind of thing really appeals to me. I kind of like to get sucked into a story and almost have like an out-of-body experience through whatever I'm watching.
I wonder if there's some connection to that and the Gothic, the dichotomy between the decay and the opulence.
Oh, probably so. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why people get into Gothic, because it's just kind of like another world for a lot of people. There's a lot of myth and lore surrounded to it, and it's also got kind of a romantic quality to a bit of the opulence too. So dark and light, fascinating stuff.
Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah.
So this would be the point where we would talk about what common themes have been cropping up in the call, and then maybe talk about those a little bit. So I'll say what I'm thinking, and then you can either tell me I'm right or wrong, or add something to it if you think there's something that we're missing. But so I feel like there's two things that are kind of twin topics. One being, the power and either power dynamics of being powerless or empowered, obviously connecting back to that trauma. And then there's also this people watching introversion, wanting to escape to maybe a different reality kind of thing. And as we kind of talked about earlier, that it may have been too early for you to know which one came first, but it's possible that either one of them could have come first. Do you think that those are like the two strongest centers for what you get out of horror, or do you think there's something else that is in there that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, you absolutely nailed it. That's what it is for me too. And I've had enough time as an adult to kind of think about these things, and really, it's kind of something that comes up again and again. So much so that it shows up in my writing. So, yep, you nailed it.
I mean, normally the next question there would be any idea why you like these things. I think in this case, both are self-evident, at least in obviously with the traumatic situation. That's obvious why that's important to you. The introversion and escape part of it, that might just be an innate part of your personality. I mean, which is not uncommon. Particularly,
definitely.
I mean, people are introverts. You can't really discuss it too much beyond that. That's just the way you are. Just like an extrovert's an extrovert.
Yeah, I really think so.
So the next question is then, if those are the things that are important to you, why horror? Couldn't you explore these things in other genres?
You know, there's something about the aesthetics too that really appeals to me. And I really have always loved the way that horror has that element of social commentary to it. I've always been really impressed by that. And I think it kind of started with Night of the Living Dead. Which is just, I mean, we could do like a whole episode on George Romero. I have kind of like a little bit of an obsession going on there, but he was, the master of that kind of stuff. And I think that, you know, it goes back to Carl Jung things about exploring the shadow side, and horror it does that so well. And it kind of like exposes these things that, you know, a lot of society just wants to kind of push away and stick into a little box and not think about. And horror is brave enough to explore those themes. And I really respect that.
How did you get into Jung?
The library, you know, it was just like available. I think it was like Man and His Symbols was the first one that I read. And I reread it recently and as an adult. And man, it was epic. Anyone who hasn't read Man and His Symbols and you're interested in the shadow side and psychology, I definitely recommend that one.
I don't think I want to read it because I understand it myself, and I don't want to have that.
Yeah, might scare you.
Was that just like a random thing that you picked up at the library, or was there somebody that said you need to go check this out? Or
I spent a lot of time just in libraries in general. It kind of influenced my decision to become a librarian. And it just perusing psychology, I think I picked it up and I thought the cover was neat. You know, I guess as a young person, you're attracted to those kinds of things.
Of course.
But yeah, I picked it up and read it and was a huge fan.
Okay. So I guess something we hadn't talked on earlier in the call is it sounds like there may also be an interest in psychology in general, which of course makes sense given the people watching part of it.
Yeah, oh, definitely. That plays into it a lot. I do enjoy reading about it, and I have kind of like an armchair knowledge of that kind of stuff. But I think if I had to go back to college, I'd pick up another major in it. It's
I can relate. I am not classically trained in that way, but, it's something that has been of interest to me ever since I was probably in kindergarten. And, multiple years of counseling and therapy and 12 stuff. So you kind of start to pick it up a little bit along the way.
I think it's really common for horror fans to at least be, marginally interested in it.
Or at least to have participated in conversations about it enough to,
right. Yeah, exactly.
So last question, is there anything that you've thought of that might be relevant that hasn't come up on the call?
This was really interesting. I feel like I know more about myself.
Awesome.
Part of the goal, yes.
It was things, it was things that I always knew, but it was interesting linking them together today. So thank you for that.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Thank you. And also thank you to anybody out there listening. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend, support us on Patreon, buy some coffee. There's links to both of those things on our website, horrormakesусhappy.com. There's also merch, all kinds of fun stuff. If nothing else, tell a friend.